It is my sincere pleasure to invite Daniel Mountjoy to the stage for closing keynote remarks here. Daniel's with Sustainable Conservation, an organization we've heard named several times today. So Daniel, thank
Great.
you.
Well, I know I'm between you and your wine or beer and some food. I think most of you probably could have given this wrap-up talk. In fact, we've heard a lot of really great wrap-up talks here. I'm just really excited. You know, this event happens every 2 years. I was one of the few people that put our hands up that we've been here since the first event, and the progress we've made is just really quite dramatic. The Post-its that are around the room here, what was accomplished this year, are significant. The stories we're hearing all is really heartening to see what we can do if we work together like this. I was asked to think about, what's the vision for being prepared for a future wet year, as we build off of everything that we've heard about today and prepare for the discussions tomorrow, where we'll hear about some other really great progress too. This year was really notable in the sense that the state and all of the individuals that were involved in Recharge moved quickly this year. Amazingly quickly for an innovative idea that has only been around for 5, 6, 7 years as a concept. There's a lot of pieces still to be worked out. And let's see, I've got control here. There we go. As we start to think about what do we need to do moving into a future wet year to advance this practice of flood-mar, this new concept. There were, okay, I get to see it down there. So let me just back here. Okay, sorry. We heard from Aaron today. Those that were prepared this year were able to do an amazing amount of work. The picture in the top left is workshops that Aaron was having 5, 6, 7 years ago to set in place what he was doing, what he was able to achieve this year on the fields. There's many other cases like that. So being prepared in advance makes a really big difference. Then, my buttons right here. Networking opportunities through flood-mar and through other events that have been put on by all of you have really expanded the conversation about flood-mar, about this concept, have allowed us to learn from what others are doing in the field. The discussions that are happening across sectors is really critical also in this discussion. It's great to have farmers talking to farmers because they listen to each other, but having farmers talk to environmentalists is really a next big piece that we ought to be thinking about. We saw some significant progress with the executive order this year, really opened up the floodgates, so to speak, for the opportunities. But it doesn't necessarily mean we've addressed all the issues that are lying behind the scene. Irrigation districts have to manage incredible complexity and have learned a lot this year. Turlock Irrigation District, where Christine operates, learned a lot about the challenges of even operating canals in the winter when you can't get out there, when solar-powered SCADA systems don't have sunlight. I mean, there's just a lot of little challenges that we find through the projects that have been implemented in this wet year. So how do we prepare better for a future wet year? The opportunities are really great. DWR has been funding a watershed study effort, starting with the Merced flood-mar project, and you'll hear more about that from Jim Wicking tomorrow. That has really given us a sense of what's possible. In the Merced area, just using existing canals, existing farmland with connections, the district there could offset 31% of the groundwater overdraft in that basin. That could happen tomorrow if the pieces were in place. If the reservoirs reoperated, as we heard a lot about today, that percentage of overdraft could be raised up to 46%. And if we started to think about infrastructure changes around bypasses, floodplains, creekside diversions, as well as the infrastructure of the old canals, that can go up to 63%. That's just one district. But if we start to think about those kind of investments, the scale that we could have, the impact we could have is really quite large. And DWR is helping us understand what that looks like. It also could reduce our flood risk with climate change by 65%, which is a significant protection for life and property. So it's a difficult process to integrate all of these different pieces, but pilot projects, I know people are saying enough pilot projects. what we're finding is that pilot projects help prove the concept in each location. It may be great that it's working in one location, but locals oftentimes are reluctant, and seeing it work in some place does trigger change. And as Christine said, Turlock Irrigation District was reluctant. They wanted to do 3, that was enough. And now they're looking at expanding that kind of a program much larger. So proof of concept is critical. The complexity that was identified during the Research Advisory Committee process that really started this network, DWR really identified these 8 areas of integration and challenge that need to be addressed. And the Research Advisory Committee came up with specific research and topics that need to be looked at and tools that need to be developed in order to address those. And many of those have been moving forward. We see a lot of discussion around FERO, finding the best sites for recharge using aerial electromagnetic imaging to identify paleo channels. That's happening. Crop compatibility is much more understood now. The water quality benefits as well as the risks is on the forefront of technical knowledge that we have to build right now, and is data collection around that I'll talk about later. The legal issues around water rights have been discussed, the flood rule curves with the Corps, and liability and insurance when you make the wrong decision on these issues is really critical. And then we've had a lot of discussion about infrastructure and investment. I won't repeat what we heard from Mark and Andy and Mike Merzwa. There's a lot of work on that, and it's very specific locally how it gets solved, as we heard from Aaron. So beyond the technology and the information and the tools and models, a really big piece of this is changing mindsets. And there's a lot of change that's already happened amongst this group. I mean, I think a lot of us are already thinking outside of the boxes we might have been in 5 years ago. Christine brought this up in terms of just the change in landowner thinking about groundwater as another place to store water. We've heard as well about the ability to think about reservoirs. You know, flood managers want to see them empty going into the winter. Water storage folks don't. But what about the mindset of the groundwater storage being full? If the reservoir was empty, but your groundwater was full, what about that change in mindset? So these are kinds of things that I think we're really starting to come up against as we start to discuss these topics. The other one that we talk a lot about is multi-benefit projects. And I just want to make the distinction on multi-benefit, that there's multi-benefit projects themselves, like Julia talked about, where you have habitat on a farmland site, where you have floodplain recharge, wildlife-friendly recharge basins, those kinds of projects. But you can have a project that doesn't look like a multi-benefit project. It might look like a traditional recharge basin, but where it's placed produces all sorts of benefits for disadvantaged communities, for subsidence, for return flows back to streams. So as we talk about multi-benefit, thinking about, is it at the site or is it the outcome that we're really trying to get at? So targeting projects to those outcomes is a whole new opportunity for us to think about as we think across the landscape and these integrated concepts. What would what would the future flood planning look like if every project included and thought about habitat enhancement on it in terms of these recharge expanded floodplains? If we start to imagine a future that puts water back on the landscape, as we just heard from David Guy, and gives water more chance to provide these multiple benefits, what would that landscape look like? Might it look like this image here? Similarly, what if flood diversion and winter recharge water rights were informed by an understanding of functional flows, so that we actually knew how much we could take out without harming the stream flow itself, and have certainty around that for our water rights applications, and also in terms of how much water we want to reserve in reservoirs versus how much goes in the ground. And what if all recharge incentives encouraged recharge in suitable locations that benefited communities or disadvantaged drinking water supplies, GDEs, subsidence areas? And these are all things that DWR and the team that we're working with there are starting to model so that we could actually incentivize recharge in locations that have the greatest benefit. And in wet years, you put it everywhere, but in years when you don't have a lot, you focus it. And these are all achievable outcomes if we adopt an inclusive FloodMAR mindset. but it also means including building greater collaborations. That's what we're here doing today. We heard a lot about core flood control, but if we started to think about collaboration, greater collaboration between the water supply agencies and the Corps, so that those solutions uniquely could be defined for each basin and each reservoir system. And what about fishery and environmental group concerns about environmental flows, so that we could design the timing and the quantity of the triggers for flood diversions for the flood managers and recharge folks that also reflects and honors those stream needs. And then cross-agency coordination between DWR and the State Water Board around water quality and data collection. And this is a really big thing that we hear a lot from growers is, don't ask us to do more monitoring. Use the monitoring programs that are out there and integrate them across agency jurisdictions so we can make the best use of that and inform our decisions around groundwater, as well as nutrient management for CV salts and irrigated lands programs. And then disadvantaged communities and irrigation districts, imagine them working together to have plans in place about the benefits and risks of different recharge methods, because water supply and water quality matter to those communities. And solutions could be designed collaboratively with ability to address if problems emerge. So many of the groups are here in this room, some of them are not. I think the network needs to continue to expand to have those kinds of collaborative conversations. The network is great for helping us keep each other informed and share experiences, as Mike talked about first thing this morning. It identifies common areas of concern, and it also identifies opportunities to collaborate. And really is a place for us to change our mindset and build those collaborations. What I've found in the network over the last year is we face a challenge for each of us of finding time and resources to collaborate outside of our own organizational missions and mandates. It's great to come together once every couple of months or every year and talk about what these issues are, but how do we find time to actually get together and work on them? DWR has played a vital role in catalyzing those kinds of conversations and collaborations through the studies they're funding, the pilot projects, the grants that they've given out, like to TNC and to Sustainable Conservation, the technical assistance they've provided for water rights applications, and support of this network as a whole. And then private foundations have also played a big role, such as the Water Foundation, using philanthropic dollars to help encourage collaborations amongst all of us, or amongst some of us. And there's a big opportunity right now with federal funding to think about how both state and federal funding programs can be designed to prioritize and give funding to collaborative efforts rather than to single issue or single outcome types of solutions. If we're really going to change our mindset, build the FloodMAR concept to a greater success, the funding support and the time for us all to work on that is critical. So tomorrow, the program really helps us, it's going to help us look at how we can leverage our interests and resources with others, and it's an opportunity to build momentum together. You're going to hear from directors of state agencies about advancing the concept of FloodMAR, and we really are in an ideal time in terms of state agency leadership being supportive of this concept, and yet there's a lot of work to be done amongst those leaders. So I hope you'll ask good questions during that session. Network members will talk about the innovative tools and guidance and resources they've developed that are examples of how collaborations have been used to advance this concept. And then you're going to be invited to participate in the network action teams. And those teams are still struggling with the time commitment to work on those issues. And we'll probably, all of us will admit that we would love to spend more time working on it. The infusion of more interest will help us all feel like we can do something. So I hope you'll think about how you can participate in those topics as you hear about them tomorrow, and how your participation could help catalyze more action out of those teams. So if we're collectively going to be prepared for a future wet year, that might mean we have 2 months to get ready, because this could be that wet year. And every wet year is a chance to apply new ideas and test new concepts. It's not going to be perfect, but the more prepared we are, the better. And if it turns out it's a dry year, then with the chance to remind ourselves that we have to be ready when water is next available, and there's a lot of work to do to build these collaborations. So there's no time to lose regardless of what kind of year it turns into. Let's use this next year effectively so that MAR can be used to better steward our water for communities and the environment and businesses. So I'll end there and turn it over to Peter.